On a quiet night in June of 1912, in the small town of Villisca, Iowa, a silence fell over the Moore family home that would never be broken. By morning, the house would no longer be just a home. It would be a crime scene so shocking, so brutal, and so chilling that it continues to haunt investigators, historians, and true crime enthusiasts more than a century later. This is not just another unsolved murder case. This is a story of innocence lost, a town thrown into chaos, and a crime so meticulously savage that it has remained one of the darkest mysteries in American history. Tonight, we open the case file on the infamous Villisca Axe murders. The town of Villisca in 1912 was the kind of place you'd imagine on an old postcard. A farming community of less than 2,500 residents. Everyone knew everyone else. Doors were rarely locked, and neighbors felt more like family. Josiah and Sarah Moore lived with their 4 children, Herman, Catherine, Boyd, and little Paul, in a modest white house at 508 East 2nd Street. The Moores were well respected. Josiah was a successful businessman who sold farm equipment, and Sarah was active in the church. Their home was the portrait of stability, faith, and hard work. No one could have predicted the horrors that would unfold there on the night of June 9, 1912. That Sunday had been special. The Moore family, along with 2 neighborhood girls, Lena and Ina Stillinger, had spent the day at church. Sarah had organized a Children's Day program, and the family stayed late to help clean up after the event. It was around 9:45 p.m. when they finally made their way home. Josiah and Sarah settled the children into bed upstairs, while the Stillinger sisters were given a guest room on the first floor. The family extinguished the lamps, said their prayers, and drifted into the kind of peaceful sleep that should have carried them safely into morning. But safety was not waiting for them. Somewhere in the darkness, a figure moved through the streets of Villisca. This person carried with them an axe. They slipped silently into the Moore home, either through an unlocked door or perhaps a hidden key. Once inside, the killer or killers waited in the shadows until the entire household was asleep. What happened next would forever stain the history of the town. The attacks began in the upstairs bedroom where Josiah and Sarah slept. Josiah was struck first, his skull crushed by repeated blows from the blunt end of the axe. It is said the force was so great that his face was unrecognizable. Sarah, sleeping beside him, met the same horrific fate. The killer then turned to the children. One by one, Herman, Catherine, Boyd, and Paul were bludgeoned with the axe, never waking, never given a chance to cry out. The brutality was not only merciless, it was excessive. The blows continued long after life had left their bodies. The Stillinger sisters, Lena and Ina, suffered last. Lena, just 12 years old, showed signs of being awake during the attack, her body suggesting she may have fought back or at least stirred in terror before the fatal blow. It is this detail, among many, that makes the crime not only tragic, but haunting. By the time the killer left, 8 souls lay dead inside the Moore home. The murder weapon, Josiah's own axe, was abandoned in the guest room, slick with blood. When the crime was discovered the next morning, Villisca descended into chaos. Neighbors arrived, then the police, then the coroner. The small house quickly became overwhelmed with onlookers. People trampled through the rooms, touching, moving, and in some cases, even stealing pieces of evidence. In today's world of forensic science, such contamination is unthinkable. But in 1912, this was a reality. The investigation began with confusion and suspicion. Who could commit such a crime? Was it a stranger passing through town? Or someone from Villisca itself? Theories spread quickly, and suspects began to emerge. One of the earliest suspects was a man named Frank Jones, a prominent Villisca resident and Iowa State Senator. Josiah Moore had once worked for Jones at his farm equipment business before breaking away to start his own company. This decision caused bitter rivalry, and some whispered that Jones ordered the killings out of revenge. But despite the gossip, no evidence ever tied Jones directly to the murders. Another suspect was Reverend George Kelly, a traveling preacher with a disturbing reputation. Kelly had been in Villisca the night of the murders and attended the same church event as the Moores. Known for odd behavior, voyeurism, and inappropriate sexual advances, Kelly confessed to the murders multiple times, only to later recant. His confession was inconsistent and bizarre, and though he was eventually tried for the crime, he was acquitted due to lack of concrete evidence. There was also talk of a transient serial killer, possibly linked to similar axe murders that had occurred in nearby towns around the same time. In fact, the Villisca axe murders were not an isolated event. Between 1911 and 1912, a series of axe killings plagued the Midwest, many of them involving entire families bludgeoned in their sleep. Was Villisca simply another stop on a killer's path of destruction? Or was this case something more personal? Despite these leads, no one was ever convicted. The case remained open, and over the years, the town itself bore the burden of suspicion. Families turned against one another. Friendships crumbled. Doors that had once been left unlocked were now bolted shut. The spirit of Villisca was shattered. And before we continue deeper into the theories and chilling details that still confound experts today, take a moment to subscribe to this channel. By subscribing, you'll join our growing community of true crime seekers who refuse to let these stories fade into silence. Hit that button now so you don't miss the mysteries that still have the power to terrify us over a century later. Now back to Villisca. As years turned into decades, the Moore house became more than a crime scene. It became a legend. Residents spoke of ghostly sightings, strange sounds, and an oppressive feeling inside the house. Paranormal investigators claim that the spirits of the victims still linger there, restless and unresolved. Visitors report children's laughter echoing in empty rooms, objects moving on their own, and a sense of overwhelming sadness pressing down upon them. But beyond the paranormal, the facts of the case are chilling enough. The killer's methodical movements, the covering of mirrors, the draping of cloth over victims' faces, it all suggests ritual, or at least intention beyond simple murder. Some believe the killings were a message, a symbolic act, or even the work of someone with deep psychological torment. What makes this case unforgettable is not just the brutality, but the complete lack of closure. Imagine living in a small town where your neighbors might include a family annihilator. Imagine walking past the Moore house, knowing that someone in your community might still be hiding the truth. Generations later, Villisca has never been able to fully escape the shadow of that night. Even today, criminologists revisit the case, pointing out similarities to modern serial killings. Theories circulate endlessly. Was Reverend Kelly truly guilty, but clever enough to walk free? Did a rival businessman orchestrate the murders from afar? Or was this simply the work of a stranger who vanished into the night, never to be caught? No matter how many times the case is re-examined, the same conclusion remains: unsolved.